Welcome back. Russian President Vladimir Putin has made his first known visit to a newly occupied Russian territory in Ukraine since he launched his invasion last year. The Kremlin says Putin made what it called a spontaneous trip to the devastated Ukrainian city of Mariupol, seized by Russian troops in May last year. Now, Russian state media says he flew in by helicopter and drove around the city. Of course, this comes just after it was announced yesterday that the International Criminal Court has issued a warrant of arrest for Putin. Let's explore further what this means for South Africa, who is due to host a BRICS summit later this year. Putin is reportedly scheduled to attend. We speak to Senior Research Fellow and Director at Africa-Asia Dialogues, that's Thembisa Fakude. Thembisa, thank you for being with us, as always. At one point, South Africa was thinking of withdrawing from the ICC, but can you confirm, as it stands, would we have to arrest Putin if he sets foot in this country?
Yes, that decision was rescinded, and during the conference of the ANC in December, it was further confirmed that the decision to pull out of the ICC has been rescinded. So South Africa is still a full member of the ICC, and if President Vladimir Putin comes to South Africa, it is expected that South Africa will have to arrest President Putin. But we know what happened with the former president of Sudan, Omar Hassan al-Bashir, who was also in South Africa, having been indicted by the ICC. Somehow he managed to escape, and many people argued at the time with an assistance of the South African government. So it's unlikely that you'll have a nuclear powerhouse president in the form of Vladimir Putin being arrested in South Africa as he comes to attend the BRICS summit later this year.
Firstly, many people are saying this could be an Omar al-Bashir moment, but officially that was put forward, if I recall, as some sort of bungle. What punishment was there, if any, for South Africa for that?
Well, there was no punishment, but you must remember South Africa was seen as a hero by many African countries who have always had a problem with ICC, and correctly so. ICC has been criticized for its selective justice. The culprits, or those that have been taken to The Hague, has been by and large African leaders, notwithstanding that we have the likes of Tony Blair, George Bush, Dick Cheney, who took us on the war in Iraq using the false information. And people are saying, why are those people not held or called to account? People such as Benjamin Netanyahu, who has continued to kill the Palestinians on a daily basis. So the credibility of ICC in Africa is not a very good one. And Africans, many of them do believe and feel that Africans must have their own tribunal court, the like of the ICC, and they are for pulling out of the ICC. So in 2016, when South Africa threatened to pull out, it was a welcome move, but of course it has since backtracked.
What about the rest of the world? What about the reputational damage if we allow Putin to attend the BRICS summit and do not arrest him? I mean, our stand at the UN was given some coverage, but surely that would make global news headlines for a very long time.
Not only is it going to make global news headline, but it's going to be a headache for the government of South Africa, including President Cyril Ramaphosa, because South Africa will be expected to act, and you are likely to have the human rights organizations making noise should Vladimir Putin come to this country. And it's going to be an interesting moment, I think. And, you know, notwithstanding what everybody else has said, the world has shrunk after Friday, when the announcement was made that the warrant of arrest is out for Vladimir Putin. It's going to become very, very difficult for him to travel henceforth. And you know, one of course expect that, knowing who he is, he will certainly insist on coming to South Africa and prove to the world that is immune and is much more powerful than what we think. So it will be up to South Africa to act. And I think it's going to be South Africa that's going to be left with a pie on its face, because they're certainly not going to be able to arrest Vladimir Putin. But that failure will certainly draw some criticism on the ability of South Africa to adhere to its commitment to the ICC.
You've already answered my next question. I was going to say, would Putin actually come and put us in this awkward situation, in this quandary for government? And you're saying he wouldn't care less.
I think knowing him, he's a macho man, and he's certainly going to make a point. I think he will come just to prove a point, but also to prove a point that his relationship with South Africa is much more stronger than many of us think. And it's going to use that moment to also communicate South Africa's position. So South Africa will find itself in a much, much more complicated position because, as I've said, most African countries have criticized ICC in the past, and they will expect that South Africa will continue with its position that, of criticizing ICC of its selective justice. So if they go ahead and arrest, if that does happen, which I think is unlikely, Vladimir Putin, South Africa will certainly find itself even in a much more complicated position when it comes to Pan-African politics.
Does it go further than that? Does this change the way, fundamentally change the way we have been relating to the rest of the world? Besides the members of BRICS, South Africa has always been seen, or has tried to be seen, as a country that upholds human rights. And we've also had close ties to the West and the East. Will this change things fundamentally?
Well, it will continue. Yes, it will add to the current criticism that South Africa has found itself, particularly after it voted it became neutral when it came to the condemnation of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So South Africa has already taken that position. It's a neutral position, and South Africa has insisted, of course, that it prefers a negotiated settlement instead of condemning either side in this current conflict. So you are likely, therefore, again, to have South Africa sitting on the fence in this regard. But unfortunately, this time around, because it has ratified the Roman statutes, it is expected to act when Putin does visit South Africa. But if it doesn't, you're going to still have a sideshow which is going to be carried out by the NGOs and human rights organizations. And you might just have other human rights organizations and people flying into South Africa specifically to humiliate Vladimir Putin if he does indeed attend the BRICS summit later this year.
Sure. All right. Thank you for your predictions. Before we let you go, I mean, something else that could possibly impact our reputation. You look at the bigger picture, the planned shutdown tomorrow. Any thoughts? How are you hoping it'll play out?
Well, like everybody else, I think the EFF has the right to protest. But unfortunately, EFF has courted, violence in past incidences of such nature. So it's correct that you have South African government preparing itself for the West, because the EFF is known to be quite comfortable in applying violent measures, particularly when it comes to protests. There's been looting over the past when EFF protested. So one hopes that tomorrow, at least the leader of EFF, President Julius Malema, will prove all of us wrong, and we're going to have a peaceful protest, highlighting all the things, by the way, that are very important, including the energy crisis that we find ourselves in this country and high unemployment. So the issues that have been raised by EFF are quite legitimate, but we're all worried, of course, because of this organization that's been associated with violence, not only outside Parliament, but inside Parliament as well. We've seen them doing a lot of unsavory things. So we hope that there's going to be a semblance of peace tomorrow, but at the same time, I don't think that we should give this blanket permission for the security apparatus in South Africa to act harshly against, if these are peaceful, it's going to be a peaceful march. I think we also need to caution that the South African security apparatus should act civil when it comes to this, to the protest tomorrow. And one hopes, of course, that everything is going to go according to plan. And those that do not wish to participate in these protests must be allowed to carry on with their lives as normal, go to work, and do business as usual. But the history has not been unfortunately on the side of the EFF when it comes to peaceful marches.
All right. Yes, I agree. Let's hope cool heads prevail all round at least. That was Senior Research Fellow and Director at Africa-Asia Dialogues, Thembisa Fakude.